aliens mistakenly texted humanity for help, and an army showed up. For 11 seconds, the collective logged 0 victories. The glowing line on the main console screen ran horizontally instead of vertically, flashing a steady, dead gray. Liaison Kalen stared at the quiet monitors on the command bridge of the flag warship, his blue fingers pressed so hard against the metal casing that his joints locked. 50 capital warships from Earth hung in a perfect, silent curve across the outer rim grid, their heavy weapon banks charging in the deep dark. The massive enemy armada was completely frozen, its automated drones stuck mid-turn with their plasma arrays flickering out. Kalen had spent his whole life watching those black ships destroy entire systems, but now they hung inert before the human line. I wish I could tell you the void fell quiet after that initial volley. It didn't. Stay close. Kalen remembered when his small scout ship had run for the shadow of the local moon 3 weeks earlier. The spires of his home world were already burning behind him, their planetary defense grids thoroughly smashed by the first wave of automated vessels. He had keyed the transmitter pad with trembling hands, sending a simple message toward a forgotten system named Earth. The ancient archives said the humans once saved a neighbor from extinction, but those records were 300 years old. Kalen did not know if anyone would receive the broadcast or if the humans had lost their teeth over the centuries. He only knew his civilization was running out of weeks before the final sweep arrived. Commander Jack Vance stood in the center of the Terran Security Council room, pulling down the cuffs of his uniform coat with a crisp, downward snap. He tapped the central table, loading the raw telemetry data that Kalen's ship had bounced through the long-range sensor arrays. The holographic display filled the room with images of elegant alien spires crumbling into dust, while an aggressive synthetic hive systematically stripped the resources from the outer borders. Vance looked at the 12 council members sitting in the curved tier above him. He told them the automated collective was not a distant worry, but a growing regional hazard that would eventually track the human border if left unchecked. The council president watched the red icons multiply on the screen, then called for an immediate vote. Every hand went up, granting Vance absolute mobilization approval within minutes. The human relief armada dropped out of hyperspatial transit directly at the coordinates of the Zephyr outpost. Kalen watched from his small cockpit view screen as the stars seemed to tear apart, replaced by 2 kilometers of solid dark hull plating. The massive warships did not reflect the light of the emerald sun. They absorbed it completely, looking like holes cut into space itself. Kalen guided his damaged scout ship into the central hangar bay of the fleet flagship, the UES Deterrent, where the heavy air smelled of recycled iron and the bitter tang of fuel. He stepped onto the polished deck and found Commander Vance waiting near the primary lift with a small honor guard. Kalen looked at the endless rows of strike cruisers and automated fighters filling the lower tiers, realizing his single message had brought an entire industrial sector into the theater of war. Vance led the alien liaison directly to the high command bridge, where the tactical maps loaded with real-time data feeds. A forward sensor officer reported that 3 synthetic scout vessels were currently crossing the system perimeter to check the spatial anomaly caused by the fleet's arrival. Vance did not launch a full fighter wing to contest them. Instead, he signaled Lieutenant Diaz, who was waiting on the edge of the border grid with a cluster of advanced stealth monitors. Diaz tracked the incoming insect-like targets until they entered the optimal kill zone, then fired the specialized phase cannons. The inverted energy beams passed straight through the enemy shields as if the mathematical fields did not exist. 3 secondary explosions flared on the display, leaving nothing behind but drifting metal ash. The sudden loss of the scouts forced the main automated fleet to alter its approach pattern. On the main monitor, hundreds of dark, asymmetrical ships clustered into a dense, centralized wedge formation to punch a hole straight through the human defensive line. Kalen pointed to the screen, his voice rising as he explained that the collective hive never changed its core math mid-battle. Vance realigned his uniform cuffs and studied the advancing wedge with a cold smile. He noted that the central clustering made the hive's local communication network highly vulnerable to a single hard pulse. He ordered the human fleet to hold its formation and wait for the enemy to reach the absolute center of the sector. Dr. Miller entered the bridge with a heavy crystalline module, sliding it into the main transmission bank with a firm click. She reported that the phase weapons had mapped the hive's shield frequencies, and the countersignal was ready to deploy. As the synthetic wedge reached optimal range, Miller triggered the hard-spectrum counter-frequency across the entire sector. The automated ships stopped tracking instantly, their internal networks shattered by the human line of code. Their weapon lines died, and their guidance loops froze in the quiet void. Vance authorized the full fleet advance, and the dreadnoughts opened fire with their main batteries. Phase cannons cut through the command vessels at the center of the frozen wedge, triggering a systematic breakdown across the auxiliary hulls. The automated network fractured completely, sending the remaining ships into a blind retreat toward the rim. Kalen watched the monitors clear as the fleet pushed forward, capturing 3 new distress signals broadcasting from the adjacent border systems. Vance stood by the glass, looking at the fresh coordinate loops loading onto his slate. He told the crew to prepare the supply lines for a broader sweep, turning his gaze toward the open dark. Kalen stood before the High Council 3 days later, the formal medallion of the Terran Alliance resting against his chest. The Great Hall was filled with engineers and pieces of machinery from both worlds, sharing schematics under the tall crystal windows. Outside, 2 distinct ship silhouettes crossed the face of the local moon, flying a steady patrol loop together over the liberated spires.